Today we're going to be reacting to the new SSERAFIM Crazy music video. I have heard the song before. I've seen little clips of the music video, but I haven't watched it in full. I do know a little bit about it going in. I know that there's some voguing featured, and I know that the House of Juicy Couture had a hand in dancing, and I assume some kind of movement direction as well. But I'm really excited to see it in full. And yeah, I think just as a little background in case you don't know who I am, my name is Gravity Jacobs. I've been in the ballroom scene as a Vogue dancer for over 8 years. I walk Vogue Femme, I walk New Way, I walk Hands and Arms, Little Old Way. And I also am a professional dancer and choreographer in the Los Angeles area. So I have worked with artists on music video projects as a dancer and as a choreographer. And I have done some work in the K-pop space, but nothing quite directly as this on this level. But I've always been really interested in the way that K-pop groups and the K-pop industry in general and in the larger music industry tends to use Vogue dance and use the aesthetics of ballroom. And I think some artists do it really well. Some artists maybe don't do it exactly the way that I would want to. So I'm really excited to see this music video. I've heard a lot of great things about it, so let's get in. Love.
Act like an angel, dressed like crazy.
I love that we're going to the chorus right away.
Act like an angel, dressed like crazy.
So, sorry, I'm gonna pause a bunch. The hands here, I wouldn't even necessarily call them like explicitly Vogue hands. And honestly, I think a lot of the choreo in this video is not explicitly, at least the choreo that the girls are doing in the group. It's not explicitly Vogue choreo, but it definitely has some influence from things you'd see with hands performance in Vogue, where you see a lot of movements with the hands around the face. But again, I think most of the choreo in this video is not actually Vogue choreo. If I'm right, I think the majority of that comes from the House of Juicy Couture, who we already saw in the lampshades and the line at the very beginning. Okay, so I was kind of wrong. That moment there with the duck walk and the catwalk, honestly, as far as the duck walk goes, I'm really not that mad at it. I mean, she was upright, she wasn't falling over. A duck walk is pretty hard for people who are not super comfortable with it. The catwalk on the outside, I think, is more of a, like an atmosphere thing than it is the actual step. So do I think it was perfect? No, but I don't think it needs to be. Like, that's really just kind of a vibe movement more than it is like a here's a catwalk situation. I think that's the thing you kind of often run into when you're doing choreographed Vogue, especially on dancers that have less familiarity with the style, that you have this kind of balance between trying to have everything look clean and correct and have everything like be super authentic, where it's like you're ultimately trying to translate a very freestyle battle style into a synchronized choreo setting. But I actually really like this formation wise. And yeah, I'm not mad at the elements at all. Okay, Brooklyn. Okay, so that moment I do want to talk about because it is the vibe of a spin dip, but it's not a spin dip, right? Where she's slipping on it and then she does that pose backwards. For it to be a full dip, she would need to have her back and head almost all the way touching the ground and have her back arched. But it's not trying to be necessarily, and I think that's sort of a recurring theme, is it's not going for like, this is exactly a dip, but it has the same vibe as one. And ultimately for Vogue, it's really all about posing, right? And that was a clean pose. For me personally, I would rather see something like that, where it is not a full dip, but it is a clean and precise pose, than have someone try and attempt a dip, but because they are not trained to do it properly, they fall out of it or it doesn't look like correct. So again, I'm not mad at it. I think it's an interesting thing to consider is that a lot of dancers, even if they're super, super skilled dancers like the girls are, if they don't have training specifically in Vogue Femme, a lot of the times they just don't have the internal hip flexibility along with the lower back flexibility in tandem to be able to fully execute a dip. I'm not sure if that's the case here or if they just chose creatively not to do one. But again, I'm not mad at it. I'm glad that they did like a clean pose rather than trying to make her do like a full dip and it wasn't, didn't look perfect.
Act like an angel and dress like crazy. Act like an angel and dress like crazy. All the girls are yelling, yelling. All the girls are yelling, yelling. All the girls are yelling, yelling.
Okay, so little mini catwalking. Okay, now we're seeing the House of Juicy Couture along there. The aesthetics of this video are so good. So that one was kind of funny. I do want to highlight that all the members of the House of Juicy Couture on the side did like a moment as if the girls in the center dipped, but they didn't actually dip. So again, it's the same like theme that we keep going back to, is that they are echoing the vibe of Vogue Femme and the like language of it without necessarily doing the actual elements, which I think is an interesting choice. And I think very often when we see mainstream artists tap into Vogue, they try and do the elements full out themselves, and often what gets critiqued is like, you obviously don't have the experience for that. But I think it's interesting that they're tapping into the vibe here, but they're not even necessarily doing the movements. So it's interesting, you don't see that a lot. Okay, now they get to go up. Great. Okay. I love that reverse. Okay, work. Yeah, honestly, overall, I really love the music video. I think there's so many cool moments aesthetically, choices being made. But the main thing, and I keep highlighting this, but I think it's really interesting, is that they left the majority of the voguing to the House of Juicy Couture, who were doing all the dips at the end. They had moments where they were catwalking around them, but the actual Vogue elements, they mostly left to them. There are some moments in the choreo where they have like a little mock catwalk arm, they have the tiny little duck walk moment, they have the like mock dip, and then in some of the hand section, there are things that I would say echo the hands you would see in Vogue, but it's not fully a Vogue Femme choreo. And I actually really like that as a choice. As a choreographer and as a teacher, it's often really, really hard to get artists or dancers who do not have experience in the language of Vogue to get them to a level where they can look really solid doing the full elements in a short amount of time. And I don't think that this was a situation where they had, months and months to train in the style. So I almost prefer seeing them highlight members of the community, put them in the video, have them creatively direct themselves, and include little bits and pieces in their own piece, but mostly showcasing them and to having it more just matching the vibe of it with their movement. I am a huge fan of the fact that they included the House of Juicy Couture, and I assume, flew them all out, which I think is sick. And they also credit them all in the description, which is so cool. I think having the audience of K-pop tap into all of these talented dancers and creative directors and choreographers is excellent. I think it's super cool and something that a lot of groups in general just don't do, is credit the people that they're inspired by. And I think especially because so much of K-pop, or a lot of songs you can point to or choreography you can point to and say, the lineage of like inspiration is pretty clearly coming from Vogue in some form or the other, but it's never something that's credited. They're not working with Vogue choreographers necessarily. They're not working with you know, dancers in the style from the US or even from Korea. There are some cases where they are, but a lot of cases where they aren't. So I love to see this. I really love to see, you know, people from ballroom getting booked for this and getting involved and being credited. I think for me, in an ideal world, I would love to see a group or a solo artist really tap into actually training in the style of Vogue, the way that they do many other styles, and actually really have that be an intentional and major part of their identity as a girl group. I think that would be so cool. And I hope that we see it in the future. I know there are some girls in the K-pop world who are training or who have trained like in Korean ballroom. I know Remy of formerly Cherry Bullet, I consider to be pretty solid. And yeah, there's definitely other cases too, but I would love to see that in the future, especially because obviously, you know, the girls are so talented in all of these groups. All of the members, they're incredible dancers, they're incredibly in sync, they have great performance quality. If you really gave them the resources and the time to learn Vogue Femme, not just for one choreo, not just for one thing, but as a style, like really ingrained in it, I think it could lead to some really cool outputs, kind of merging those two worlds. But I also understand, you know, the industry is tough. You don't have the time to do that. So I think this is actually such a great solution to that problem of using members of actual ballroom, highlighting them appropriately, giving them the space to go off without necessarily like dumbing down everything to kind of form a middle ground where both of them can do it. And, you know, still having those elements of Vogue in the girls' dance, but not necessarily leaning as much into it and letting them kind of do the majority of the visual work in that sense. But yeah, amazing video, love the song, obsessed with it. It's been in my head since it came out, which was like fully 2 days ago, but still love the song, love the video. I'm really excited to see if they continue this kind of vibe in the future. The last thing I want to talk about is that the music itself is not a Vogue beat. Like, it's not a Vogue song. It is the right BPM, roughly. In Vogue, you're thinking, I would say usually around 124 to 132, some exceptions, but that's normally where you would be sitting. It is that like world of BPM. And then it also has that sort of 4-on-the-4 vibe that makes it easy to Vogue do. So it's a natural pairing, but it's not explicitly a Vogue track, right? You're not hearing crashes, you're not hearing like commentation or anything like that, but it still very much fits, and it is like a very cohesive sort of concept. And yeah, I always love to see the girls taking inspiration and properly doing it. So this was a great time. I'm really glad I got to react to this, and I hope to see more of it in the future.